Start With Why by Simon Sinek is a book that explores the concept of the Golden Circle, which is a framework for understanding how great leaders and organizations inspire people to take action. In Chapter 1, titled Assume You Know, Sinek introduces the concept of the Golden Circle and explains why starting with why is crucial for success. Sinek begins by asking readers to think about why some companies are able to achieve extraordinary success while others struggle to survive. He argues that most companies focus on what they do, such as their products or services, and how they do it, such as their unique selling proposition or process. However, the most successful companies start with why they do what they do, which is the purpose, cause, or belief that inspires them to exist. Sinek points to examples such as Apple, which is known for its innovative products and designs, but its success is not based solely on its products. Instead, it is driven by its why, which is to challenge the status quo and think differently. Sinek notes that starting with why creates a sense of purpose and direction, which inspires people to follow and take action. Sinek argues that the human brain is wired to respond to stories and symbols, which is why starting with why is so effective. He explains that the Golden Circle is made up of 3 concentric circles: why, how, and what. The why circle represents the purpose, cause, or belief that inspires an organization. The how circle represents the actions taken to bring that inspiration to life, and the what circle represents the tangible products or services that result from those actions. Sinek notes that most companies start with what they do, which is easy to communicate and understand but is not very inspiring. He suggests that companies should instead start with why they do what they do, which is more challenging to articulate but has the power to inspire people and create loyal customers. Sinek argues that assuming you know your why is dangerous because it can lead to complacency and a lack of innovation. He notes that companies such as Blockbuster, which assumed they knew their why, failed to adapt to changing technologies and customer preferences, which led to their demise. Sinek concludes the chapter by encouraging readers to start with why and to keep asking why until they get to the root cause of their purpose, cause, or belief. He suggests that companies should focus on building relationships with customers who share their why, rather than trying to appeal to everyone. In summary, Assume You Know is the opening chapter of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which introduces the concept of the Golden Circle and explains why starting with why is crucial for success. Sinek argues that the most successful companies start with why, which is the purpose, cause, or belief that inspires them to exist. He encourages readers to keep asking why until they get to the root cause of their why and to focus on building relationships with customers who share their why. In Chapter 2 of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, titled Carrots and Sticks, the author explores the 2 primary ways in which people are motivated: extrinsic motivation, carrots and sticks, and intrinsic motivation, the why. Sinek argues that most companies and organizations rely on extrinsic motivation to drive behavior. This includes things like bonuses, promotions, and other rewards, the carrot, and punishments, reprimands, and other negative consequences, the stick. While these can be effective in the short term, Sinek argues that they are not sustainable in the long term, and can actually lead to a decrease in motivation and engagement. Instead, Sinek suggests that companies should focus on intrinsic motivation, which is driven by the why. When people are inspired by a sense of purpose, cause, or belief, they are more likely to be motivated and engaged in their work. This is because they feel like they are contributing to something greater than themselves, and that their work has meaning and purpose. Sinek notes that intrinsic motivation is not a new concept, and that great leaders throughout history have understood its power. He uses the example of Martin Luther King Jr., who inspired millions of people to fight for civil rights by articulating a clear why and creating a movement that was based on shared values and beliefs. Sinek also notes that extrinsic motivation can actually be counterproductive in some cases, particularly when it comes to creative work. When people are focused on rewards or punishments, they may be less likely to take risks or think outside the box, because they are afraid of failure or not meeting expectations. Finally, Sinek suggests that companies can foster intrinsic motivation by creating a culture that is based on shared values and beliefs. This includes things like open communication, a sense of purpose and meaning, and opportunities for growth and development. When people feel like they are a part of a community that shares their why, they are more likely to be motivated and engaged in their work. In summary, Carrots and Sticks is the second chapter of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which explores the two primary ways in which people are motivated: extrinsic motivation, carrots and sticks, and intrinsic motivation, the why. Sinek argues that while extrinsic motivation can be effective in the short term, it is not sustainable in the long term, and that companies should instead focus on fostering intrinsic motivation by creating a culture that is based on shared values and beliefs. This includes things like open communication, a sense of purpose and meaning, and opportunities for growth and development. In Chapter 3 of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, titled The Golden Circle, the author introduces a new concept that he argues is key to understanding how great leaders and organizations achieve success. This concept is called the Golden Circle, and it consists of three elements: why, how, and what. The why is the central element of the Golden Circle, and it represents a company's purpose or belief. It is the reason why the company exists, and it is the driving force behind everything the company does. Sinek argues that great leaders and organizations start with the why, and that this sets them apart from their competitors. The how is the second element of the Golden Circle, and it represents a company's unique way of doing things. It is the set of values, principles, and methods that the company uses to achieve its goals. Sinek notes that the how is important, but that it is not as important as the why, because the how can change over time. The what is the third and outermost element of the Golden Circle, and it represents a company's products or services. It is what the company sells, and it is what most people focus on when they think about the company. Sinek argues that while the what is important, it should not be the starting point for a company's strategy. Sinek uses the example of Apple to illustrate the power of the Golden Circle. He notes that Apple is a company that starts with the why, and that this is what sets them apart from their competitors. Apple's why is to challenge the status quo and think differently, and this is evident in everything they do, from their products to their marketing to their retail stores. Sinek also notes that the Golden Circle is not just relevant for companies, but for individuals as well. He argues that everyone should start with the why, and that this will help them achieve greater success and fulfillment in their lives. In summary, the Golden Circle is the third chapter of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which introduces a new concept that he argues is key to understanding how great leaders and organizations achieve success. The Golden Circle consists of three elements: why, how, and what. Sinek argues that great leaders and organizations start with the why, and that this sets them apart from their competitors. He uses the example of Apple to illustrate the power of the Golden Circle, and he notes that the Golden Circle is relevant for individuals as well. In Chapter 4 of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, titled This Is Not Opinion, This Is Biology, the author delves into the science behind the Golden Circle and why starting with the why is so important. Sinek notes that the human brain is divided into three parts: the neocortex, the limbic system, and the reptilian brain. The neocortex is responsible for rational and analytical thought, while the limbic system is responsible for emotions, feelings, and behavior. The reptilian brain is responsible for survival instincts and basic functions like breathing and heart rate. Sinek argues that most companies focus on appealing to the neocortex by promoting the features and benefits of their products or services. However, he notes that this is not how people make decisions. Instead, people make decisions based on emotions and feelings, which are controlled by the limbic system. Sinek notes that starting with the why is so powerful because it appeals to the limbic system. When people are inspired by a sense of purpose or belief, they are more likely to be emotionally invested in a company or organization. This emotional investment leads to loyalty, trust, and engagement. Sinek also notes that the why is not just important for external communication with customers, but also for internal communication with employees. When employees understand the why, they are more likely to be motivated and engaged in their work, because they feel like they are part of something greater than themselves. Sinek uses the example of Southwest Airlines to illustrate the power of starting with the why. Southwest's why is to democratize air travel and make it accessible to everyone. This why is evident in everything the company does, from their low fares to their friendly service to their unconventional approach to business. Sinek also notes that starting with the why is not just important for companies, but for individuals as well. When individuals understand their why, they are more likely to be fulfilled and successful in their personal and professional lives. In summary, this is not opinion, this is biology is the fourth chapter of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which delves into the science behind the golden circle and why starting with the why is so important. Sinek argues that the human brain is divided into three parts, and that starting with the why appeals to the limbic system, which is responsible for emotions and feelings. He uses the example of Southwest Airlines to illustrate the power of starting with the why, and he notes that starting with the why is important for both companies and individuals. In Chapter 5 of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, titled Clarity, Discipline, Consistency, the author discusses the importance of these three elements in achieving success and staying true to one's why. Sinek notes that clarity is essential in communicating the why of a company or organization. Without clarity, people will not understand the purpose or beliefs that drive the company. Sinek recommends that companies and individuals be clear about their why, how, and what, and that they communicate this clearly and consistently to their employees and customers. Discipline is also important in staying true to one's why. Sinek notes that it is easy to get distracted by short-term goals or external pressures, but that discipline is required to stay focused on the why. This discipline requires saying no to things that do not align with the why, and making difficult decisions when necessary. Consistency is the third element of success, and it requires staying true to the why over the long term. Sinek notes that consistency is what creates trust and loyalty, and that it requires a steadfast commitment to the why even when faced with challenges or setbacks. Sinek uses the example of Martin Luther King Jr. to illustrate the importance of clarity, discipline, and consistency. King was clear about his why, to fight for equality and justice for all people, and he communicated this clearly and consistently. He was disciplined in his approach, staying focused on his why even when faced with opposition or violence. And he was consistent over the long term, continuing to fight for his why until his death. Sinek also notes that clarity, discipline, and consistency are not just important for companies or organizations, but for individuals as well. He recommends that individuals be clear about their own why, and that they develop the discipline and consistency required to achieve their goals and stay true to their purpose. In summary, clarity, discipline, consistency is the fifth chapter of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which discusses the importance of these three elements in achieving success and staying true to one's why. Sinek notes that clarity is essential in communicating the why, discipline is required to stay focused on the why, and consistency creates trust and loyalty over the long term. He uses the example of Martin Luther King Jr. to illustrate these principles, and he recommends that individuals also apply these principles to their own lives. Chapter 6 of Start With Why by Simon Sinek is titled The Emergence of Trust and explores the crucial role that trust plays in successful leadership and relationships. Sinek argues that trust is the foundation of all successful relationships, whether they be between individuals or organizations. He notes that trust is not something that can be commanded or demanded, but must be earned through consistent actions and behavior that demonstrate integrity, reliability, and honesty. Sinek outlines several key factors that contribute to the emergence of trust, including vulnerability, empathy, and listening. He explains that leaders who are willing to be vulnerable with their teams and share their struggles and failures are more likely to build trust and inspire loyalty. Similarly, leaders who demonstrate empathy and truly listen to their team members are more likely to create an environment of trust and collaboration. In addition, Sinek emphasizes the importance of keeping promises and delivering on commitments in building trust. He notes that trust is easily eroded by broken promises or inconsistent behavior, and that leaders must demonstrate a consistent pattern of reliability and dependability to build and maintain trust over time. Sinek also discusses the impact of trust on organizational culture and success. He notes that trust is closely linked to innovation and creativity, as teams that trust each other are more likely to take risks and explore new ideas. Similarly, Teams that trust their leaders are more likely to be loyal and committed to the organization's goals and mission. Sinek uses several examples to illustrate the importance of trust and leadership, including the success of Southwest Airlines and the leadership style of Nelson Mandela. He notes that both Southwest and Mandela prioritized building trust with their teams and stakeholders, and that this trust was a key factor in their success. In summary, The Emergence of Trust is the sixth chapter of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which explores the crucial role of trust in successful leadership and relationships. Sinek emphasizes the importance of vulnerability, empathy, and consistency in building trust, and notes that trust is closely linked to organizational culture and success. He uses examples from Southwest Airlines and Nelson Mandela to illustrate the importance of trust in leadership, and encourages leaders to prioritize building trust with their teams and stakeholders. Chapter 7 of Start With Why by Simon Sinek is titled How a Tipping Point Tips and explores the concept of the tipping point and how it can be used to create meaningful change in organizations and society. Sinek defines the tipping point as the moment when a trend or idea reaches a critical mass and begins to spread rapidly, ultimately leading to significant change. He notes that while many factors contribute to the tipping point, one key factor is the participation of early adopters, individuals or groups who are willing to embrace new ideas and take risks. Sinek outlines several key characteristics of early adopters, including their willingness to challenge the status quo and their ability to inspire others. He notes that early adopters are often natural leaders who are able to influence others and create momentum for new ideas or initiatives. In addition, Sinek emphasizes the importance of creating a clear and compelling why in order to inspire early adopters and create momentum for change. He notes that a clear and compelling why provides a sense of purpose and direction, and can inspire individuals and groups to take action and embrace new ideas. Sinek also discusses the importance of creating an environment that supports the growth and spread of new ideas. He notes that this requires a culture of trust and collaboration, where individuals feel safe to take risks and share their ideas with others. Finally, Sinek notes that the tipping point requires persistence and perseverance. He emphasizes that change is often slow and difficult, and that it requires a long-term commitment and willingness to face challenges and setbacks. Sinek uses several examples to illustrate the concept of the tipping point, including the growth of the civil rights movement in the United States and the success of the Apple Computer Company. He notes that both of these movements were driven by early adopters who were inspired by a clear and compelling why, and who were able to create momentum for change through their leadership and influence. In summary, How a Tipping Point Tips is the seventh chapter of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which explores the concept of the tipping point and how it can be used to create meaningful change in organizations and society. Sinek emphasizes the importance of early adopters, creating a clear and compelling why, and creating a supportive environment for the growth and spread of new ideas. He uses examples from the civil rights movement and Apple Computer to illustrate the concept of the tipping point, and notes that change requires persistence and perseverance.